Daniel, you've got to look at it. There's not a lot in it in terms of points from 6th position down to 12th position right now.
No.
And certainly not to 11th position. So no wonder they're celebrating, because they know they've just extricated themselves from what could become a real dogfight between now and the end of the season. And Hearts are now in that dogfight. And this is the second point that we have to make. This is a scandalous result for Hearts. A scandalous season. It's way below what should be deemed acceptable at Tynecastle. They've spent a lot of money. They're all excited about the analytics and getting a hold of Brighton's supercomputer, and rightly so, they should be. This should be a club on the up. And we had this conversation, didn't we, about Critchley, Neil Critchley. He's making a habit of not winning the games that they have to win.
Aye.
And that's no position for a Hearts manager to be in. And I think that's why Hearts fans were a little bit concerned going into that game at the weekend, because it's happened time and time again. Mm-hmm. And Saturday was just the latest example. Here's a game you have to go and win, and they hardly turned up from what I saw. They were bombarding Motherwell and really going at them and taking the game. And it was, again, a kind of Adam Ida shrug of the shoulders. We might get there, we might not. And that's not good enough from Hearts. It's nowhere near good enough. And
that's the thing.
And it could be worse for Hearts.
Aye.
Because if we're saying that they can't win big games, well, I tell you what, the last 5 are huge.
Aye, there's some coming up, aye.
Because there is a danger. I know they've got a little cushion, a nice points cushion just now, but there's a very real danger. A couple of results get away from you, and the next thing you know, you're above the trapdoor, just and no more. And I think that the relegation playoff spot becomes more and more into view.
I think you make a good point. Obviously, it's one thing not to win at Fir Park, but the fact that it was 0-0, you couldn't even score a goal. I know. But just finally on Hearts, what is your gut feeling if Tony Bloom, if and when this deal is done, talk about £10 million getting ploughed into the club? Look, it's just my opinion. I could be totally wrong. I don't see Neil Critchley being the man to guide it forward.
I quite like him, and I quite like some of the work that he's done. And obviously, when you think about where Hearts were when he came into the club, there's been improvements.
Mm-hmm, aye.
I do think that he probably needs to properly judge him. I think you probably need to give him another transfer window, and give him another transfer window with
that's fair.
A couple of quid in his pocket, and with the analytics to help him. And I think you'll then you're then more able, better position to make a real judgment on him. But what worries me for Neil Critchley is that I think the Hearts fans have already reached their conclusion. A large group of Hearts fans have come to the conclusion that this guy's not going to cut it. And that's a difficult place to come back from.
Yeah.
I think that's where he is, and that's where he's going to end this season. And he better hope that he's capable of bringing something more out of these players, because what's a bad kind of season thus far, a flawed campaign to be sitting in the bottom 6 going into the last 5 games of the season. Well, what's bad could become catastrophic if he doesn't get an instant bounce out of these players now that they know what they're faced with between now and the end of the season.
The comment here from Kaiser again, he says the decline of Shankland is evident on the form Hearts, and that's the thing to point out as well, because if you'd said this time last year Shankland was going to endure this kind of season, you wouldn't have believed that.
Yeah, Hearts haven't looked after him properly. That's part of the problem. Contractually, just everything, it just hasn't felt right. There's something. There's a sort of, it feels like a disconnect between Lawrence Shankland and Hearts a little bit. I think the effort is still there, but it's just not happening. It just kind of felt since the summer that just the marriage was likely to end unhappily. He got a couple of chances at Fir Park that Lawrence Shankland would usually bury, including the one right at the death, where he's kind of screwed it across the face. Last season they were in the roof of the net, weren't they? The bottom corner. It's just not happened, and I think probably never admit it, but I think there might be an element of he's a bit distracted as well, as is only natural. You don't know what your next move is. You don't know where you're going to be. You know, you're in danger your career every time you walk out onto a pitch because you don't have a contract for next season. And all it takes is one bad tackle and that's you.
He scored 4 goals all season, and he hasn't scored what he scored 1 in his last 12, which is it's just crazy.
Great. And it does actually underlines what a massive contributor he was last season.
It does.
And the imbalance that Hearts had, that they were so dependent upon him. So the question was always going to be, what happens if Shankland's goal dries up?
Yeah.
Well, you've seen what happens. They end up in the bottom six, fighting a relegation battle. And, you know, the chances are they're going to lose Shankland. And you watch, I don't know where Lon Shankland will end up next season. What I am prepared to wager is as soon as he's settled and he's ended up wherever he's ended up, he'll start scoring goals again.
I agree.
You know it's coming. You can put the kettle on for it.